we need to make people fall in love with us. And when you think of what you need to do that and you reframe that for a client and say, we need to create the hook. What's the hook? What does this word really mean, and how do we find a common language? And even when I'm hiring agencies or working with partners, I'm like, first things first, we need to kick off going through vocabulary. And they're like, what? That sounds really, and how you're going to present work. I need to actually see your presentations. And they're like, that seems boring. Isn't it more important that you value the work we do? I'm like, nope, because at the end of the day, if we can't speak the same language and sell it through, you're not going to be able to make anything you want to make. So when I look at this word craft from the marketing perspective, I think these sort of orange words popping up are more so how I would define it. It's a very slippery, heavily interpreted in many different ways work, but I really see it as if I were hiring someone or thinking about my work or how I look on the spectrum, there is very much so a specific value and cost for the team who's focused on quality and mastery and their expertise. And I need to figure out how I blend that with scale. And what does scale actually mean to me as a marketer, and what does it mean to the partners I'm working with? And I think it very much so doesn't mean mass in our sense. Sure, if you're a craft person making a product and you get to sell it in Walmart and it scales, that's a whole different story. But when it comes to our industry, scale for me is actually being able to scale a design system so other people can use it, making things that are consistent so that other teams can pick them up and make sure that the brand I love and adore is showing up the right way in all of these channels. Have you ever delivered a piece of work and then you kind of hand it off and then you see it on a poster somewhere or an ad, and you're like, oh my God, that is not at all the way that was supposed to be interpreted. But there's so many amazing ways now, I think, that we can actually help that happen. And that's where I really see this idea of scale. And I think that we can, rethink and fuel a new way of looking at the spectrums of work. So I showed you that long sort of spectrum of just projects, but more often we see the really horrible, I hate it, funnel, which is like all this stuff at the top is brand and all this stuff at the bottom is performance, and everybody's attention is just so focused on the bottom funnel, especially in the US. Because that's what's driving, fast sales, real-time sales, things. And that way that we're looking at it actually doesn't show things flowing down like I think it's supposed to. It really feels like it's created this huge separation in these different teams thinking about completely different assets. And to be honest, on the client side, the departments don't even talk to each other. If you're at the bottom of the funnel, you might sit downstairs and work completely on your own with media, which means that conversation never happens upstream. So when I sit with clients and think about what our job to be done is, it's actually much more simple. I'm like, we need to make people fall in love with us. And when you think of what you need to do that and you reframe that for a client and say, we need to create the hook. What's the hook? And they go, okay, who are we going to hire to do that? I'm certainly going to hire a very skilled team to come in to help me do that, because this is really, really hard. Making someone fall in love with you is most certainly not easy. And then on the other side, we need to close the deal. So someone needs to power everything, make people fall in love. I want it, I love it. And then everything else is about making sure it's anchored and we close the deal. That to me is about this notion of delivering growth of relationships. So people, consumers, don't just buy from us once and we make them fall in love and then everything's performance from here on out. We don't need to have just 2 tentpole big brand moments every year. Everything should be focused on how we're thinking about great work fueling each other. Because I think when you have this continuous cycle of sales, you need to say, hey, we don't just do one interesting, great thing a year, like the work that we just saw before. That needs to be a steady drum beat. We need to keep injecting saliency moments and memory structures just as much as we need to focus on the consistency, the machine, the closing the deal, which will force scale-driven consistency over time. And this is not the right use of the words, but sometimes when I'm speaking with clients about this, they're like, oh, okay, so like this top part is brand and craft and the bottom part is performance and scale. I'm like, kind of, but what I think is just rethinking your ecosystem of how all the ideas are working together and how things that are really driving memorability are going into our system and completely cycling. And we need the right people in the room to be able to do that. So I see the shape of the question really being more, can scale, the ability to do all these things, fuel and enable craft? Can we use these tools and systems to be able to say, I can actually put the things I want out in the world because I can work with these tools and systems and scaling mechanisms?